Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Stan, hanging out in Gainesville, Florida, and today we are discussing booms, thrust lighting, pre-production schedules, and ego, including mine.
And this is David in the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. And everyone, welcome to episode 191.
Oh, I wish I could say that in Spanish. You say siento?
You know, 191, we are like COVID. It's just lingering and going on and on and on. And, you know, when are we going to get rid of this?
We need a vaccine, a Light Talk vaccine.
Hey, there's a third vaccine out. You know, that's good now.
Yeah, by the
It's
Russians.
3.
There's a Russian vaccine.
No. This is the one with Oxford and AstraZeneca is the latest big,
Yeah, it's like
big one.
70%, you know. I mean, we're spoiled now. In the old days, it's like Fauci said he would be happy with 50%. Now we're getting them at 90 and 95%. And like when 70% one comes out, it's like, oh, I poo-poo at your 70% vaccine.
Yeah. I will just tell you that I didn't realize that I had a very low-grade anxiety in my gut for the last 4 years, and I didn't realize it was there until today. Somehow it has finally dissipated.
Did you take some X-Lax or something?
I don't know what
Good,
it is.
clean colon would work.
Something's changed, but I feel like there was a small little knot in my stomach. It's been there. I didn't notice it. I adapted to it. I got used to it. And now that it's been healed, somehow I'm calm.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you cleared it all out of your system. Well, anyway, let's get started. And we have news today. Unlike last week, today we do have news. Lots of news, as a matter of fact. First of all, we have election, breaking news, update, like CNN does. What's that? Breaking news. Da, 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 da. Everything
that's a trauma
everything is
queens
breaking
over there.
news. I mean, they go, breaking news.
Hey, the sun came up. Breaking news is breaking the horizon.
Everything's breaking news. It's like, come on. It's like the boy who cried wolf, or in this case, Wolf Blitzer.
They lose the potency.
Right.
Yes,
I
indeed.
mean, there could be a nuclear accident somewhere. People don't even listen to it anymore.
Right. We landed on Venus. Breaking news.
The Venetian landed here. That's even better. But breaking news, we have the election, and it looks like we actually do know who our president's going to be.
According to the Government Services Administration, they are preparing for a transition.
Absolutely. And Pennsylvania certified to vote today.
Did that happen? I didn't hear that.
And Michigan.
As did Nevada.
So the game is over, as they say. The jig is up. President-elect Joe Biden. That's good news, I think. Hopefully, with this, we'll have some financial assistance to our industry, don't you think?
Yes.
And because it's been ridiculous. And boy, you know, there are a lot of people out there in need. Have you seen those terrible food lines? Steve, in Texas, was that in Dallas? Where you had those thousands of cars?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so horrible. It's like back in the Depression. People need help. So let's hope that they'll get off their asses and sign a bill, and let's get some money to these people. California is almost going down on a shutdown again. It could happen any day.
Well, again, we look at our brothers and sisters in Las Vegas,
Right.
Nevada. Yeah. I'm happy every day I have a job teaching.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would be doing right now if I were, I'd be out digging a ditch, I guess.
Or you'd be lucky if you get a job digging a ditch. It's really, really tough right now for a lot of people. Let's hope that they sign this new bill so that we can get some help to our friends and the industry and to all the people who own restaurants and have to now, not have income either, and the people who work at those restaurants. It's a huge industry out there, and a lot of people are hurting. Okay, so Stan has some interesting news from the Met in the same sort of vein, helping people out.
Well, according to the New York Times, if you believe the New York Times, all the news that's fit to print, they say, that Peter Gelb, the head honcho at the Met, has made an offer to all the employees. That includes the musicians and the technicians and everybody who's, I think they said about 1,000 people or 1,500 people, that they wanted to bring them back onto payroll, even though their season's canceled till, I guess, fall of 2021 at $1,500 a week. But then they were also wanting them to take certain cuts permanently, like 30% pay cuts permanently. And I think the union was pushing back against that. But, it's like, that sounds to me like that's like the opening offer, and there's a place for negotiation. It sounds like it's a step in the right direction. So let's hope that moves in that direction, and maybe it's a good sign for other entities as well.
That would be a very interesting deal. Now, I don't know about the 30% permanent. I mean, they should probably, maybe 30% the first year, 20% the second year. Listen, I'm not a good negotiator.
Yeah, I think there was some. I think it was a 3-phase thing. It was like, we'll give you $1,500. You come back initially, and we'll pay you this, and then they're also trying to extract this permanent reduction as well. And I think that's probably something but I don't. I would hope that's not a non-starter. I would hope that's the beginning of negotiations.
Yeah, that would be great. It's nice though that they're coming out, because all those people, they have no income coming in right now either. So that's good to see these companies, doing something. All right, so that's good news. Also, we have some news that next week we have drone show and lighting control pioneer Nils Thorgensen on. So Nils will be here. Now, he has an amazing, amazing career. He's an inventor. I mean, the guy is a total, genius when it comes to this.
Flying Pig Systems, I learned about that history.
Exactly. Flying Pig and a bunch of other things. And now he has Verge Aero, which produces drone shows. And he did the drones for the Biden victory night. So that was his show. He'll be on next week, so everyone tune in. He's a really good interview. And we have news from...
This I don't believe. I think this is fake news.
Well, I'll let Steve announce this, because Steve was the one who told me about it.
I just saw our podcast is number 8 in Belgium.
Number 8?
Number 8 with a bullet in Belgium.
In the whole country? Can't be.
Well, it's not that big a country. But, I started
number
looking
8
at this.
podcast in Belgium?
To the performing arts, we're in number 8, which is gigantic.
Category.
But that category is huge. Think about
it. Is it?
Most people aren't listening to a lighting podcast in the performing arts.
No, that's true.
They're listening, they're talking about concerts, they're talking about ballet, opera, theater. It's huge, performing arts. And believe me, I bet we're the top lighting podcast in Belgium. Probably the technical theater podcast.
It's not hard to be the top one if that's the only one. Probably the only one.
We've got data coming in from Spain, from Finland, from Taiwan, from Sweden. Our little podcast is growing around the world. And I know you didn't want me to talk about this, but I just want to tell our listeners out there, including the Faroe Islands, we are announcing the Light Talk World Tour with our band.
That's right.
Details are coming soon. And Belgium, you are going to be our first stop. You're going to be our kickoff stop.
And where? The Faroe Islands or Belgium?
Belgium's number one.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I guess it depends on the season.
Oh.
Whether I don't know if I want to spend, maybe I don't want to spend winter in Belgium.
But isn't the Faroe Islands part of Belgium?
No, that's part of Denmark.
Oh, Denmark, Belgium's the same thing, really.
No, but isn't Belgium sort of like
we just dropped to position 9 in Belgium.
Isn't Belgium a very affluent suburb of France?
Oh, okay. It's something like that.
Okay, we're now down to number 10.
Is that the place they wear wooden shoes?
No,
is that Belgium?
That's Holland, which is the Netherlands.
Right.
We've now dropped in the Netherlands. We've managed to insult the Netherlands and Belgium.
We love the whole world.
All right. And then our final bit of news today is that, believe it or not, we have a puzzler winner. Da-da-da! Steve?
Yes, our puzzler question there is why are dimmers in 12, 24, 48, 96 configurations? And we have a winner, and that is Steve Terry.
No surprise there.
Well, what Steve suggested here is he suggested that we need to look at our lighting history, and we need to go back and look at the Strand CD80 rack, and the Strand CD80 rack that came out in the late 70s. That was fed by 3-phase 4-wire.
That's the answer.
So someone sent in a very good answer, and they were talking about the number had to be divisible by 2. Yeah, they talked about the binary relationship of computer control, but that was wrong. In a nutshell, dimming circuits have to be divisible by 3, and that's what Steve talks about.
Because of 3-phase. So that's the power.
Right, A, B, and C.
Interesting.
4 circuits on A, 4 circuits on B, 4 circuits on C. So there you go.
But there were a lot of theories that were bandied about on the Light Talk Facebook page.
It's very educational.
A lot of people were involved in it, and it was. And to tell you the truth, I did not know the answer. Like no one's surprised because I'm not an electrician.
We went down to the nursing home, got Steve out, and he was the only one old enough to remember there was a time without DMX.
No, I actually had the answer, but I didn't trust my instinct.
People were trying to figure this out around DMX, and DMX didn't come along till the 90s, and that would have made the binary answer make sense.
And I worked with CD80s. I remember tying them in, actually.
Well, Steve was your boss, right?
Yes, for a while there. That's
Which
true.
is amazing. He didn't fire you, but it was nice. It was nice. But Stan, you're going to send that Ross Perot for president button directly to Steve.
You know what? If I can find it. And I may just hunt around for it this weekend. It's a long weekend. If I find that Ross Perot button, at the very least, I will send it. It may be valuable, but...
I doubt it.
I don't think so.
You never know. People collect weird stuff.
I think it's right up there with that Mondale button.
Let's get to our questions.
Yeah, Steve has our first listener question.
And coming from the other side of the Atlantic, it is Robert in Germany. And Robert writes, any advice on lighting a thrust house? Okay. Well, for our younger listeners, there are basically 4 types of theaters, right? There's a proscenium, in which there's a one point of view. You sit in kind of a stadium seating and look at it like you're looking at a movie. There's in the round, so you're sitting on all sides of the performer. There is a black box, which is also known as a flexible space, which can be configured into almost anything you want. And there is the thrust house, and the audience sits on 3 sides. The thing about a thrust house is the acting area extends into the audience area. So this makes a thrust house a little difficult to light for. You have to think about where you're focusing your lights, where you're putting them so you're not blinding the audience all night long. You need to think about balancing your color. A lot of people, I was looking at this online, and people were saying things like, oh yeah, you have great strong backlight color in there. Well, maybe. But also, if you think about how thrust stages are blocked, most directors block kind of in a triangular pattern. And so when the actor turns upstage, that wonderful blue backlight turns your actor into a Smurf. So you've got to be thinking about how you're lighting that actor. And I treat thrusts the same way I treat an arena. I light from 4 sides. I start thinking about my color combinations, kind of if you want a recipe book maybe. Let's say you're trying to use yellow in your show. Well, maybe from one side of a thrust, you have a medium yellow. From the other side, you have a pale yellow. So a lot of times in a thrust house, I'll use variations of the same color. Maybe a Tahiti blue from one side and an azure blue from the other side. It's a good opportunity to throw in some gobos and open white to cut across all that color you're putting on stage. But you really have to keep thinking, rather than a proscenium, which is kind of a kick line, people are presenting forward, actors are turning constantly and presenting to all 3 sides. So you've got to have that balance of light so that when I'm turning into it, I'm still in a believable world, as opposed to what I'm looking at when I'm looking at whatever you consider front of house, whether that's left, right, or center. What do you guys do in a thrust house?
Well, I learned in a thrust house at the University of Miami, and my teacher, my professor, Ken Kurtz, actually wrote this terrific article in Theater Crafts magazine. This was so old, that was before Lighting Dimensions. It was in Theater Crafts, and it was called Lighting for Open Stage Realism, and it was exactly about lighting for thrust. And it's very interesting, because unlike what Steve approaches, which is a valid approach of lighting thrust, absolutely, is that it's more like a 3-direction lighting plan for area lights. And then you add big strokes of washes for color. And usually on a diagonal, usually coming from a VOM type of position. And there's no way in the world you're going to make it look the same from every seat, unless every light's colored the same and it's the same intensity. So why try? So the way to do it, at least the way my professor taught me and the way I still do it in thrust, the way I teach it, is 3 or 4 light areas, like Steve, that has a little bit of a change, that so you can model around the face in a nice, neutral, clear type light, and then adding big, bold strokes of color and angle on top of it.
David, you bring up a good point. That kind of matchy-matchy approach is just a bad idea. It's like going down to Men's Warehouse and getting yourself a tie and a pocket square that match. You think this is going to be a good idea, but it never is. I think this big swash of color coming in and not trying to blend it all and match it all, I think you're on the right direction.
I do agree that you should embrace the reality that it's not going to be some kind of identical thing across all the seats, that you live with that. And I think the approaches that you've all mentioned is exactly how I've approached it. And I've lit quite a bit of thrust, and I actually like it. I think it's really a lot of fun. And but the approaches you mentioned make perfect sense to me. JJ in Houston wants to know, what is your school's normal pre-production schedule for lighting designs to process work start to finish? To process work. I don't know if I'm pulling this question apart correctly or not. And so pre-production is sort of one thing, and then going into production is maybe something else. And so I'll just sort of give you a little rundown. I mean, we work through a conceptual process early on, which is about ideas and analyzing the script and talking to the director and that usual process. Then we encourage our designers to spend as much time as possible in rehearsals, watching the show, sitting next to the director, choreographer, bantering back and forth, participating in the creation of the staging. Then we sort of move into a schematic planning phase, which is like, laying out some lights, looking at some systems, responding to the scenic arrangement, and that moves into storyboards. And then from those storyboards, which could be a visualization process, it could be a sketch process. I mean, our students are given a lot of different tools, and we don't dictate which tools they use. They choose the tools that work for them. And there's quite a variation. Those storyboards develop into a rough plot. Right. And then we would say that might be where the line is from in pre-production. We're not putting things in the board. In visualization, they might be like the associate or the programmer might be putting in some stuff in the console in preparing if they were using a visualizer. And then we move into like production, which is sort of, we have like a pre-hang phase where stuff that I approve, the electrician will start putting up in the air. There's still a little wiggle room to make some changes if things change in the rehearsals. Then we finish the hang. It gets focused. We go into tech, dress, open as normal. And then there's one thing that we like to do that I think is important that often gets overlooked, is that we have a reflection period. We have an opportunity to go back and look at the work, look at the results with a critical eye and talk about it. And one way we do that is we go to the photographs, and I sit with my student and we go through like rushes in film, and we look at those shots, and then we sort of very quickly identify, throw it out, throw it out, throw it out. We do 3 passes until we get down to the good shots, and then we'll talk more specifically about the results of each shot and compare it to what the designer was going for and what we ended up getting and how we thought it worked.
Well, we work, I guess, a little differently, and I interpret the question a little differently. So we're at a university. We're not at a Lort Theater. We have a completely different schedule than a professional company has. So when I say this and everyone goes, oh, you got to do a show in 3 weeks. Well, maybe you do. Maybe you do at an equity house, but I'm at a university, so we work differently. So I think about this over a 7-week period. So 7 weeks out from the opening of the show, that's when we get the first preliminary plot back. Then when we're about 5 weeks out, we get our second preliminary plot. And this is when the show is being looked at by the electricians. This is when it's being costed out. Then we're looking at labor, installation. We're looking at the whole thing moving in. Are there problems? We're working through the idea of the focus. But those 2 preliminary plots are an opportunity for the students to meet with the master electrician and talk through the show and look at scope of project. The week after that, we have the final plot due. And at that point, there's no changes. We're now moving into the next week, which is hang. and focus. Then we move into tech. That evolves into dress, and then we're at opening. So our whole process, excluding all the designer-director conversations, once we start putting pencil to paper, we create that show in about 6 weeks to opening.
That's a good time period, I think.
That doesn't sound all that different than our process, actually. Maybe just didn't use the same words.
Like Steve says, and I'm sure Stan agrees with this, it's not a professional theater. It's a laboratory.
No,
it's a laboratory
absolutely.
Experience.
Right.
And everyone needs to be aware of that. For everyone, from the student stage manager to the student actor to the student designer. Right. So Jane in North Carolina writes, can you discuss dance booms versus opera booms? All right, so I don't do a lot of dance. I do a lot of opera, and I do theater, and I do musicals, a lot of musicals, stuff like that. And to tell you the truth, it's a boom. I don't think there's a difference. I mean, there are different types of booms. You have booms that you flange to the deck, right? And then you tie off to the grid and you hang sidearms on. And of course, those are semi-permanent, so you can't get any wagons in and out. You have booms that roll, that actually, it's like a cart that they use a lot in Europe and some of the larger opera houses, which are fabulous because you can hang a lot of lights on them and you can actually climb up them from the back. It has ladders to go up the back and they're very easy to focus. You have booms that are basically used for road shows that are very portable. The lights are within a truss, and the trusses are stacked vertically, so the lights are always connected on them, and they break down into sections. You have flying booms, which actually fly in and out on pipes or other devices so that they can clear for wagons that move on and off, but then they can fly back in. One of the coolest boom systems that I've seen was on Billy Elliot, as a matter of fact. And I don't know if you guys seen that show or seen that plot, but it's really quite brilliant. Rick Fisher used a lot of flying booms. There could have been ladders or trusses. I'm not too sure, but that was really cool. And that's about it. So am I missing something? What exactly is the difference between an opera boom and a dance boom? Steve, do you know?
Well, let me ask you a question, because I'd never thought about that much either. And someone years ago was telling me that there's a focus difference. But, I don't know that there is, but I'm going to take their word for it. And they told me with a dance boom, the emphasis is for the light to go upstage, downstage, and to stay off legs, obviously. And an opera boom was trying as best it can to stay off legs, but to cheat the light from downstage to upstage so you get more light on the performers' faces. I don't know if that's true. Clearly there's some issues there with where all that excess light is going when it crosses the stage.
There's logic to it.
Well, I don't know about this. But I just thought I'll throw that out there.
I've never focused a boom that hits the leg on the other side. Never.
Right.
Ever.
Right. What if there's scenic legs and it wasn't?
Well, you got to still throw, unless you want that shadow, you got to throw light on there, and it's going to hit, and it's going to create a shadow.
And then people are going to cast their shadow on.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
So
Yeah,
sometimes you do that intentionally. Absolutely. We talked about this on a show a few episodes ago about focusing techniques for side light, and I don't see a difference from doing a musical, an opera, and or a play or a dance piece. There's certain ways. Sometimes you're going to leave the downstage open. Sometimes you're going to do sharp lanes. Sometimes you may even have two sets. It's really interesting. I posted that terrific 1975 New York Public Library video of a chorus line before it moved to Broadway. And you can exactly see, even though it's a terrible video, and boy, I watch that thing and I get goosebumps because those actors and singers and dancers are so amazing. What a great show that was. But you can actually see that Theron kind of had two sets of side light. She had some side light that was open, but then she had side lights that were strictly lanes. So people would go in and out of lanes, and she used that all the time, and the choreography used it all the time, so that you had this amazing sense of travel, of distance, going light, shadow, light, shadow, light,
falling
shadow.
into dark, being able to fall into darkness is.
And they use that with those periactoi that would like turn at the same time. One of the greatest moments is at the end of I Think I've Got It, or I Hope I Get It, whatever the opening song is, where they all like go upstage right before the build to the button, and they go upstage like 2 steps upstage. And at that point, they go to cross light. And as they come down stage, the light actually fades down in like a 3 count, and those mirrors start to turn, and it goes to a complete blackout in like 3 or 4 seconds. And then they hit that line, and boom. And they hold it up with those great chords at the end of that song, right? And the only way she could do that, and actually I talked to her about this. I when I was a grad student, I said, that was one of the greatest lighting sequences I've ever seen. And I asked her, how did you come up with that? And she said, I just watched rehearsal. I thought it was fantastic. Rehearsal. She watched rehearsal and saw it in her mind's eye. And to do that, she had to do very strict lane focus on the side light. So again, it just depends on what you want to do.
Do you have a favorite moving light for booms?
I've used a lot of different moving lights on booms. They have to have shutters, obviously.
Right.
A favorite one, I don't know. I've used Clay Packy fixtures. I've used GLP. What are those, 350s?
S350s?
Yeah, I've used those on booms. But I don't know the difference between an opera boom and a dance one. I'm sorry. So maybe there is, and maybe one of our listeners can go ahead and tell us.
Or maybe it's just the story has morphed over years, and there's this person running around now going, "Oh, this is what an opera boom is."
I don't see a difference.
We'll have to call Jane.
There's no difference.
You are listening to Light Talk, and today Light Talk is sponsored by.
This is a public service announcement from VioBland, the Vegan Institute of Better Living and Nutritious Diets. We at VioBland are dismayed at the continued sponsorship of Light Talk by Pet Sweater Japan. This dubious company has advertised the most disgusting products like turtle jelly, drunken shrimp, tech table turkey loaf, cow piss, and wasp cookies. Many of our volunteers who enjoy listening to the Lumen Brothers end up vomiting halfway through the show. Contrary to public opinion, not every listener of Light Talk is a gross, disgusting carnivore who would, given the choice, eat their pets before consuming a piece of delicious tofu. We at VioBland would like to educate the remaining deplorable troglodyte listeners of Light Talk toward healthy alternatives to the poison that Pet Sweater Japan hawks to unsuspecting consumers. Instead of turtle jelly, why not try a delicious and healthful helping of kelp kreplach? For Thanksgiving, substitute tech table turkey loaf with tofu mignon, or try a fermented salt wafer instead of a wasp cookie. Your colon will thank you in the morning. Finally, a word of caution to our friends in the theater. Our research has shown that the flatulence expelled by a typical stagehand has twice the methane content of 5 free-range bovines. Remember that the next time you light up a cigarette during your coffee break. VioBland, bringing healthy, bland alternatives to gross theatrical diets.
And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, those crazy ducks tell us that once again it's time for another installment of Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about ego control.
To Major Tom.
Ego control to Major Tom. How to check your own ego and control others to stay open and collaborative during the process of show creation. Well, this is a very interesting topic because, we're all artists and therefore we all have egos.
You have to have an ego to survive.
You got to have an ego, even if you're just a normal person and not crazy like us.
But there's a but to that.
Well, there's a but to everything. What's the but to this?
Well, the but, I would say, my favorite person to channel when dealing with this is one of our great presidents, Abraham Lincoln, who said this when asked about how he was going to handle the big issues of the day, the Civil War and the amendment to the Constitution to free the slaves. He said this quote. He said something about one must be able to sublimate was the word he used, your ego to the task at hand. So he was able to put the task that needed to be done in front of his own needs or his own ego. And I thought that was quite brilliant. And so whenever I'm faced with that, I just always think about that great Abraham Lincoln quote, to sublimate my ego to the task at hand.
Well, thank God I'm not Abraham Lincoln, because I say, screw you, my idea's the best.
Right. 2 pistols and 20 paces. That's what I have to say. We're dealing in a collaborative art form. A lot of us cherish that. Matter of fact, I think you really kind of have to cherish that to be in the theater. But a lot of people have difficulties.
It's not for everyone.
You have to be a jazz musician. I'll get back to my whole music thing.
Jazz is good.
You have to be a jazz musician. No one is more important than the other, unless you're, Wynton Marsalis or someone like that, or Chick Corea.
I bet he's a great jammer.
But you know something? He is a great jammer, and so is Chick Corea. You don't hear, hour-long solos from those cats. The bass players and the drummers and the singers, everyone else, well, of course, they're all excellent musicians at their level.
That's what makes Light Talk work. We jam.
And that's what makes theater work. So it's being that type of musician and not a headliner. You're not like Prince.
We're all drummers.
You're more like Chick Corea. This is one of the great things that when I was playing regularly, I would never get in a band where I was the best person in the band. As a matter of fact, I would seek out bands where I was the worst musician in the band, because that's how you learn.
Well, that goes back to my old quote about, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Or if you're the most talented person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, absolutely. But what happens when one member of the team starts getting out of control?
They fire them.
Well, what if it's the director?
The producer fires them. You know what? I think time is a good. It's like the Asian thinking. The water on the rock, right? You just wait. Time takes care of things.
Yeah, eventually the show open, you go home.
The truth shows up given enough time. Everybody shows that,
Okay, so how do we teach our students this?
Well, I don't channel Abraham Lincoln. I bring up Gordon Gekko from Wall Street. Greed is good. I think ego is good. It's really important. You can have lots of ego without damaging people. And I know you're not suggesting that with your Abraham Lincoln quote that all ego damages people. But I think you've got to be competitive. You've got, I think you do have to feel like you're the best person in the room. There is a point where you can do that without being cruel, and you can do that and still listen to people. But I think you have to walk in thinking, I've got the solution, I've got the idea, I've got this under control. And I think when someone challenges your idea, I think that you do have a good point about that. That is the time for you to take a moment to reflect before you immediately, cut them off at the knees. Maybe you didn't have the best idea in the room. But sometimes if everyone comes into the room with great egos and great ideas, it does stimulate conversation.
Well, that's the word sublimate. The sublimation is the key word. You don't get rid of it. You have to control it. And that's what you're saying, Steve, is that ego has to be under your control.
You both have good points, actually. But I think that when it comes down to it, we respect each other in the room and respect each other. And I don't exactly agree that you have to feel that you're the best person in that room or the most talented or whatever. The best creative teams I have belonged to, the directors are extremely, extremely respectful of the designers, because they have chosen those designers not to do what they tell them to do, but to think like directors. They want designers who think like directors. So I think that it's who you're going to work with, and it's who you're working with, and how much respect they give you.
I'll just add, I looked up sublimation just to make sure I'm right. And I think the other word that you could insert there is impulse. If you allow your ego to control you and you impulsively, shout out or become arrogant or whatever, because your ego is a very impulsive thing. Impulse control is important. And I think and I think in a collaborative environment, you can have a strong sense of self. I don't disagree with Steve in a strong sense of I bring something to the table for sure. But I think that impulse control is important.
So how do you deal with a student whose ego is like making them blind to the collaborative process?
I wonder how they got there in the first place. Give us a case study, like sketch a little example.
Well, I mean, if someone is very stubborn about an idea and the director, who may be a faculty member or maybe a guest or whatever, comes up to you and talks to you, say, John is a little out of control here. He kind of thinks he knows what he's kind of bullying the other designers who may not be, as Steve says, thinking that they are one of the most talented people in there. It's really tricky because we've all had students like that who are kind of been shell-shocked from other experiences, or they just may just be unsure of themselves. So how do you deal with that person?
I mean, you have to pull them aside.
Yeah.
You have to find a private time, not in front of the group, but a private time, and preferably not a private time at the end of rehearsal.
Yeah.
Let everybody have a good night's sleep, and, I'll meet you for coffee tomorrow. We'll talk about the process a little bit. So I think, also letting them have some time. They don't even know there's a problem, probably.
Probably not.
But they're relaxed when they come back in the next day. And then find a way to discuss it so it's not a personal attack.
Right. And go back to the old, what was it, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. How can I help you? How can I make your job easier? Maybe the costumes are having problems. How can I, as a lighting designer, help out this costume problem?
Synergize. Yeah.
Synergize. And also be sensitive and also be helpful. Just be a team member, I guess.
It's going to be a slow process. If we go back to Abraham Lincoln there, he took 2 years to fire George McClellan.
Yeah.
It took him a while. They had therapy together. They had tea together. They burned some sage together. But Lincoln had a lot of patience. But after 2 years, it even wore him out too.
Oh yeah, well,
That's a classic story. Firing McClellan, it did, and then we finally hired Grant. Everything changed. It's true. I think Steve is right about having the conversation in private. Wait, and timing is everything. That's the patience thing again. The next day, let some of the air out of the balloon, let some of the stress, emotions fade, right? And when you have that conversation, it's important. And I would add that sometimes the first conversation might not be enough. So you just gently bring it up if it keeps to occurring, and hopefully the awareness. And I think peers help too. If other people tell the student, here's something that we saw, and to try and avoid you statements, to try and avoid accusatory statements, and say, this is how I felt when that was going on. And they eventually, I think, I have seen success where people become aware of their thing, and they slowly adapt themselves and grow. We see incredible transformations of students from first year to third year. I can think of my third years right now, and I think about where they were 2 years ago, and they're just completely a different people in terms of their approach to the work.
That's a good point when you said about not using you. Well, I would go one step further and use we.
Always we.
We are a team, and this is how the team feels.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be great if we felt that support, so that we can make the synergy work.
I statements always beat you statements.
It really is the key to making a successful production, is to have that type of freedom, just so that you don't take anything personally. You can't take it personally. You just have to feel that your idea may not be the answer, but that doesn't mean you don't give it. You don't offer it, and that idea is valued. And we move on, I mean, there are many times when I thought I had the greatest idea about this moment, and I presented it, and they looked and they said, yeah, maybe, let's try it. And then we tried it, and it was like, nah, it's not working. And and I may still think it's a better idea, but then I just let it go because it's not about me. And then as lighting designers, and this is what I used to do all the time, and I've stopped doing it because it's such an intense period when you're lighting a show, because you may not have a lot of time, and you're trying to get that show lit, and you're over rehearsal, and you just have blinders on, and you're not listening to the show, and you don't realize that that lighting atmosphere is not working. It may look great, but it's not working because you're not listening to the show. You're not taking the show in holistically. And that is what ego causes. And that's a real big problem. You will not be successful if you have blinders on and you're not watching and listening to the whole show in a holistic way.
I was just flashing back on when I was in Florence, and when you go to see the David, you actually walk down this great rotunda, and there are all of these sculptures called the slaves, and they're unfinished. And there's you have the emerging figure of the person, and they're only half sculpted, and the rest of it is still stone, and he's not done. And you read about it, and it talks about Michelangelo was saying that he didn't, like the sculpture was already in the stone, And his job was just releasing them. It was taking away what needed to be taken away. So he wasn't really creating the beautiful sculpture of the being. The being was already there, and his job was to just take away what was not necessary. And I think that's a beautiful way to think about art. Is it comes through you, not of you.
Yeah, that's great. I've heard that before. I know that story. My art history teacher told me that story, and it was so illuminating.
We're a vessel by which the creative source comes through us, not of us.
But Michelangelo had a little bit of talent.
Just a tad. Well, if talent is being connected to the creative source in the universe, if that's what art is, he had a really strong connection with not a lot of static. And maybe that ego is what gets in the way of letting the creative force, which is beyond us, but comes through us. That's just how I see it.
Yeah, that's nice. So Steve has our last question of the day.
I love this question. It's Eric in Oklahoma.
That's good.
And he writes, I just got hired to light up our courthouse for Christmas.
Woohoo.
The building is now illuminated by high-pressure sodium spotlights. I want to color these with red and green gels.
Ooh.
Will this work, or will the gels just burn up? Okay, this is like the best Christmas question
ever. It is red and green, sodium vapor. What could go wrong?
And let me just say the gels are the least of your problems.
That's true.
But if you're looking for something, I found. Let's see here, Special FX Lighting.
Oh.
And it's let's see, the website here is fxlighting.com. And that's just a cesspool of how to take care of these kind of industrial lights. I just don't know who to bounce this question to yet. Should I send it to David, who is Mr. Red and Green? Should I send it to Stan, who is Mr. Architecture? Let me just say, your gel is not the answer.
No, gel is not the answer. So you know what? He could probably find a retrofit LED source for those housings. Right, and it could. Is
the city going to let them take them apart?
Yeah, right. They're probably all rusted.
Well, they might.
Well, first of all,
because he can put the sodium vapors back in when he's done.
But why does he not want sodium?
Well, because it's
550
nanometers only. It's a narrow band source.
And that red is going to look really good. The green may work.
You don't have. There's no red or green in that light in that source.
So what Stan is saying is the higher pressure sodium lights have over 80% of their output at shorter wavelengths than red. So already combined with our little human eyes and a sodium vapor light, what's going to happen is that red is going to look orange. It's never going to look red. Doesn't matter how much gel you put on it.
You can't add what's not there. It's a filter.
Subtractive color mixing.
Yeah, he has to have a different. And to answer the question of gel will melt, and 100 to the UV will destroy the gel as well. There are companies that make any gel color you want in glass substrate designed for exterior. There's less of that now with the LED revolution, but you might be able to find that. But the simple solution, find a retrofit LED source for that light, put it in there, and get a glass filter.
And that's what FX Products does. Because they call it Easy Glass.
There you go.
High temperature color control.
Yeah. There's actually a simpler solution than that, because I think that these lights are so old they're rusted, and there's no way he's going to get those sodium vapor filaments out of there.
Yeah,
I think what you're going to have to do is go down to Home Depot and buy some really high-powered LED lights, right? Just white or colored, whatever, and then gaffers tape them onto the pole right next to the sodium vapor lights and go for it. It'll be cheaper, it'll be quicker, and it will get the color you want.
Since you're going there, assuming he has some money, I do have a product for him.
It's the courthouse. It's a courthouse. They got money.
Those people paying fines every day.
I'm going to recommend that he go to, I will post this on the Light Talk Facebook group, that he go to Cast Source, which is an architectural lighting company who has a beautiful new product called the RGBW Bluetooth controlled source fixture. I have 4 of them in my house. I'm demoing them for the company. They are gorgeous. They are bright as heck. You set the cue from your phone, tell it when to turn on, have it do a dance, have it just do colors, whatever you want. They're not, I don't know what the cost is, but man, I run mine at like 3%. And they're in any color. They're bright as heck. It'll take the courthouse into a new realm. So I will post a link to that particular technology.
Home Depot, $29.95.
Stay out of Home Depot in the exterior lighting
world. And a
world.
roll of gaffer's tape, and you're done.
and Michelangelo could have had a bucket of white when he was painting the ceiling.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's throw Eric a bone here. So he's got his red and green courthouse.
Right.
Can he go to Home Depot and find a light that he can put a gobo in?
Ooh, I don't know about that. I've never looked for
or homemade gobo or a kook in front of it, so you get some texture on that thing. Since we're going down to Ace or Home Depot or Lowe's,
we're getting real fancy here.
Oh, okay. Well, Eric's got some plans.
Okay. I think you just got to listen to our show next week, because we're going to be talking about drones, and you can do your own drone show. Who needs an expert? Just buy about 10 drones.
Deep pockets.
No, the drones aren't that expensive. You can buy the cheap ones, and you just fly them up there and just gaffer tape a flashlight to it. It like goes like Drone Focus Deluxe, right? And just have like a green flashlight here and a red flashlight there, and you're done.
All right, time's up.
Well, the rocking sounds of the luminoids tell us.
Hang on. I think you two have introduced a good puzzler for next week.
Oh, what is it? What's the new puzzler?
Can I go to Home Depot or Lowe's and find a landscape light, right? A landscape light that I can turn into a projection gobo effect for my house.
Ooh. All right. Well, we all have Home Depots and Lowe's in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, but like in Dallas, I bet Steve has better ones than I have.
No, you said you were putting in some landscape light earlier, so maybe you need a gobo.
I'm doing a lot of landscape lighting. It's looking gorgeous.
All right.
There you go. Maybe you can win your Ross Perot button back from Steve Terry.
It's time to put my Christmas laser back out there, But, pretty soon we're going to have these tiny little drones that you can just set out in your front yard for Christmas. And they'll just like fly around your front yard.
Yeah, pre-programmed, to your perimeter.
That's all
you put
you
up some.
need.
Yeah,
that's all you
I want them for Halloween so I can chase the children away.
Yeah, right. Well, the rocking sounds of the luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, and just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to the podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you decide to litigate, the law firm of Flex, Flock, Flare, and Glare and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and from deep in the heart of Texas.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk with drone show and lighting control pioneer Nils Storgeson.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Sayonara.
Toodles.